Welcome to the Polite Conversations podcast, where every episode is focused on civility, decorum, and good manners. And I'm your lovable, non-controversial host, Ina. If you know me, you know I definitely don't like to ruffle any feathers at all. Welcome to part 2, dear listeners. Just wanted to start off with a content warning. We do talk about some difficult topics and views in this part, rape apologetics and such, that can be hard to listen to. We also read some fairly graphic quotes and discuss sexual violence and assault, as well as the types of people who try to downplay these things and conflate consuming any alcohol with extreme intoxication or incapacitation to assist with their victim blaming. It shouldn't need to be said, but let me say it right at the top. Consent is not complicated, even though some like to pretend it is in order to muddy the waters. Consent can also be revoked at any point. And people who are drinking alcohol can still very enthusiastically consent, unless they are so intoxicated or incapacitated that they can't, in which case it's pretty clear that they can't, or if there's any doubt to whether someone is aware enough of what's happening, then it's best not to engage in activities that require clear consent. This is not hard. What a person is wearing or not wearing is also irrelevant because no type of clothing or lack thereof can justify sexual assault or violence. Anyway, these are the types of things we will be discussing, so please proceed with caution. If you have experienced sexual abuse or sexual violence, please check the show notes for resources that can help. Now, the episode. And in Better Angels of Our Nature, he has a chapter on the rights revolutions where he talks about rape.
Oh boy.
And there's two sources that he cites. One is Christina Hoff Sommers, and she is known as based mom, fan of Milo Yiannopoulos. Basically MRA, men's rights activist, anti-feminist, extremely right-wing, just awful, extremely biased, works for a right-wing think tank. Mm-hmm. And the other person is this Heather McDonald.
Wow, she is absolutely out of control.
She really is unhinged.
She's like scary.
Unhinged rape apologist. Christina Hoff Sommers is bad, but
a deep racist, like truly hateful about black people.
Yes, very openly racist.
Yes.
And Pinker blurbed her book, and so he cites these two people to downplay rape stats. Mm-hmm. Do these sound all like reasonable sources on rape? Right wing.
What, you mean the author of The War Against Boys, Christina Hoff Sommers? What do you mean?
Milo Yiannopoulos' best friend, the person who went on Red Ice by accident, Nazi podcast that is.
Oh my gosh. I've done a lot of things that I regret, but I have never accidentally gone on a Nazi's podcast.
Yeah.
And I'm going to take that to my grave as an accomplishment, I think. I don't expect to step in that particular hole at any point.
Yeah, I think that's a little better than wearing hats and gloves for civilized, polite behavior.
Right.
I think so. So Pinker says things like, and Kate Mann did a great thread on this, and I'll link to that in the show notes. But she's talking about Pinker's views on rape. So he says, rape is not exactly a normal part of male sexuality, but it is not too far off either.
Jesus.
I mean, imagine having that opinion.
Well, the way that he has talked about the perpetrators of sexual violence in his own field does suggest that he doesn't find it all that bad. Because he does think that, like, removing somebody from a position where they have access to students, to possible victims, is like too high a price to pay.
Yeah. I mean, if a feminist said this about men, right, it would be perceived as hugely insulting.
Well, that's right. That's exactly right. And he would be mad about it, right?
Yeah. So, like...
If like, Gloria Steinem had said that exact sentence, he would put it in his book as an example of feminist hysteria.
Yeah. Yes. But see, his point is that it's it's a part of male nature, so we can't exactly just hold them accountable or something. And then he adds to it, like, by quoting and by citing Christina Hoff Sommers and Heather McDonald, and he doesn't cite, like, proper statistics. These are, like, opinion pieces and things.
Yeah, it's a lot of opinion and, like, anecdote.
Yeah, it's shocking. Like, I read some of these things that he's citing. So with Christina Hoff Sommers, here's a excerpt from her book, Who Stole Feminism? So first she has this questionnaire, and this is pretty awful and graphic, so trigger warnings and everything. So yeah, these 4 questions are being used in rape and sexual assault research in this questionnaire. Number 1, has a man or boy ever made you have sex by using force or threatening to harm you or someone close to you? Just so there is no mistake, by sex we mean putting a penis in your vagina. Number 2, has anyone ever made you have oral sex by force or threat of harm? Just so there is no mistake, by oral sex we mean that a man or boy put his penis in your mouth, or somebody penetrated your vagina or anus with his mouth or tongue. Number 3, has anyone ever made you have anal sex by force or threat of harm? Number 4, has anyone ever put fingers or objects in your vagina or anus against your will by using force or threat? Any woman who answered yes to any one of these 4 questions was classified as a victim of rape. So, Christina Hoff Sommers has some issues with this. And she says, an affirmative answer to any one of the first 3 questions does reasonably put one in the category of rape victim. The 4th is problematic, for it includes cases in which a boy penetrated a girl with his finger against her will in a heavy petting situation. Certainly the boy behaved badly, but is he a rapist? Probably neither he nor his date would say so. Yet the survey classifies him as a rapist and her as a rape victim. I called Dr. Kilpatrick and asked him about the 4th question. Well, he said, if a woman is forcibly penetrated by an object such as a broomstick, we would call that rape. So would I said. But isn't there a big difference between being violated by a broomstick and being violated by a finger? Dr. Kilpatrick acknowledged this. We should have split out fingers versus objects, he said.
And therefore the whole survey is wrong?
Yes.
But also, this is what
Pinker cites as junk rape statistics.
Yes. It is not junk statistics. First of all, it does not actually counter the fact that both instances count as rape.
How is that, like, up for debate if someone is being penetrated against their will?
No, I'll tell you what. Here's a fun story. I got a phone call. This was like 10 years ago. I got a phone call at 3 a.m. from my friend who was staying at a friend's house in the next town over, that this had happened to her. that she had been sleeping at the house and that this person came into the room and used his fingers in exactly that manner. And I'll tell you what, we all knew that was an emergency.
Yeah.
It was 3 a.m. I got in my car. I drove over to the next town. I got her and I brought her back to my house. Do you think that that's not something that should be captured? Right? Like, we all understood what had just happened. Well, except for the boy. He wanted to say it was no big deal. But the rest of us understood that what had just happened was an assault.
I don't understand how that is debatable. If it's against her will, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be as awful as being penetrated by a broomstick.
Right. So answering yes because it wasn't a broomstick, but it was fingers, that's not an incorrect answer.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, in terms of like, we always want to do questionnaire questions that don't have too many compounds in them, right? Because that can confuse the reader.
Right.
And if we did want to break it down later into categories, we wouldn't be able to because the person had said yes, but they hadn't said which it was. Like, that is all true. But if the question is, did you get penetrated against your will by anything? The answer to that is yes, and those yeses always mean an assault happened. So that is not junk data. Right. That is useful data. It just isn't as specific as maybe he would have liked now that he's thinking about it, right? If he really wanted to know about objects versus fingers. But that wasn't the research question.
Right. I mean, yeah, this is the first thing he cites in that for junk rape statistics to minimize rape.
That is ridiculous. I mean, really, like, if you think about the deep specificity of that nitpick that Christina Hoff Sommers had with the question, and then you think about the broad brush and the vagueness and the absolute throwing out of relevant information in the work of Steven Pinker, like, those two things would make your brain explode.
Right. And the next thing that he cites is a Heather McDonald op-ed. He not only has cited this, but he's tweeted about how perfect this whole piece is. So let me just read some quotes from it. While women's studies professors bang pots and blow whistles at anti-rape rallies, in the dorm next door, freshmen, counselors, and deans pass out tips for better orgasms and the use of sex toys. The academic bureaucracy is roomy enough to sponsor both the dour, anti-male feminism of the college rape movement and the promiscuous hookup culture of student life. I mean, this is just the dumbest fucking point.
Like, what point are you trying to make here?
How are those mutually exclusive? Like, Peterson has also gone on about this, and all I can see is that these people don't understand consent. Like,
yes. Well, yeah, and they're strawmanning the idea of sex positivity, right? Because, like, being sex positive means celebrating the kinds of sex that make your experience better. The kinds that you agree to and are excited about. And they are not about, like, allowing any space for the kind of sex that hurts you.
Right.
That seems pretty clear. Like, that's not that hard.
Right. And I mean, feminism is not anti-male.
Right.
Wanting to have positive, consensual sexual experiences that are also enjoyable and can go outside of the norm or whatever, as long as two people consent. I mean, how does that contradict being against rape?
It doesn't. But this is like the libs of TikTok style of rhetoric where you, like, point at somebody saying something and you go, like, but that doesn't make any sense. And then a bunch of people are like, you're right, it doesn't, without really, like, putting it together.
Right. Okay, so let me continue reading some more wonderful quotes. So what reality does lie behind the campus rape industry?
Oh, God, what?
Yeah, that term, eh?
It's an industry?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A booze-fueled hookup culture of one night or sometimes just partial night stands. Students in the 60s demanded that college administrators stop setting rules for fraternization. We're adults, the students shouted. We can manage our own lives. If we want to have members of the opposite sex in our rooms at any hour of the day or night, that's our right. The colleges meekly complied and opened a Pandora's box of boorish, sluttish behavior that gets cruder each year.
Wow.
Do the boys riding the testosterone wave act thuggishly towards girls? You bet. Do the girls try to match their insensitivity? Indisputably. I mean, what decade? What century?
I know. I'm just thinking about how upset they were that there was an email about Halloween costumes.
Yeah.
And reminding students to maybe think twice before they put on that Native American princess costume.
Right.
Versus this scolding, paternalistic, condemnation of students choosing to dress the way they want and hang out with who they want at the time of night that they want.
It boggles my mind, honestly, and I grew up in fucking Saudi Arabia, a theocracy, and I went to college here in Toronto, and it was perfectly free, and nobody could control who you brought to your dorm room at what hour. I mean, you just have to sign your guests in, but that's about it.
Yeah.
And I cannot believe how many times amongst these IDW types I've come across this theme of how college dorms allowing boys into the rooms has just degraded society.
Okay, time for bed, Grandpa. Can we just... What's going on? And again, this is very much in line with Steven Pinker's concern that we don't value the nuclear family and marriage and living in a safe environment for our children and a 2-parent household and it's all this very conservative project that we need everybody to couple up with their opposite sex partner and make babies and raise them to emulate the aristocrats
and not complain about rape or racism.
Yeah, please do not.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing is they have this very clear rhetorical through line of infantilization and childish tantrums, and the way that they paint university admins as these bullied little weak-willed nannies that don't know how to say no to the angry babies. And you saw it in there, they use the word meekly to refer to the universities. And it's administrations are not a weak-willed nanny.
As we're seeing them crack the skulls open of protesters right now.
They're absolutely willing to recruit every single ounce of force of the state in order to shut down behaviors that they don't want to see more of. And so it's very silly to act like they are these spineless little babies that can't do anything in the face of this, torrent of angry students. It simply does not reflect reality.
Yeah. Yep. And so now she's talking about, I think she's talking about a woman who said she was raped but didn't fully remember everything about the experience because she had some drinks. And she says, now perhaps the male willfully exploited the narrator's self-inflicted incapacitation. If so, he deserves censure for taking advantage of a female in distress. But to hold the narrator completely without responsibility requires stripping women of volition and moral agency. Though the Harvard victim does not remember her actions, it's highly unlikely that she passed out upon arriving at the party and was dragged away like roadkill while other students looked on.
You mean what happened at Stanford?
Rather, she probably participated voluntarily in the usual prelude to intercourse, and probably even in intercourse itself, however woozily.
So this is a straw man again, because in cases where both parties were drunk or somebody was drunk but they still enthusiastically consented, like nobody's lives are getting ruined over this. Nobody is getting into legal trouble over that.
Yep. I mean, we've all been to college. I mean, well, no, I shouldn't say that. We all haven't, but...
No, but we have all been in our late teens, early 20s.
Yes, exactly. We know how it works. And people drink and people manage to have one-night stands without it being rapey. So that's not what it's about.
And the law agrees with it. This is not some kind of like gotcha about like, but legally you could get... No, you cannot. If the person consented, even if they're drunk, you're legally in the clear. There's like ethical questions about like why you pushed past knowing that they were super drunk, but legally you're not getting in trouble. So chill out.
Even if the Harvard victim's drunkenness cancels any responsibility that she might share for the interaction's finale, is she equally without responsibility for all of her behavior up to that point, including getting so drunk that she can't remember anything? Campus rape ideology holds that inebriation strips women of responsibility for their actions, but preserves male responsibility not only for their own actions, but for their partners as well. Thus do men again become the guardians of female well-being.
Everything they don't like has to be an ideology, right? Like everything that other people believe is an ideology, and everything that I believe is a fact, and it was arrived at through perfect reason.
Right. So if someone is raped on campus, it's suddenly campus rape ideology.
Right. The fact that you would define it as rape. And like personally, I am a very free ideology. Like there are different ways of thinking about ideology, right? And for some people like that wouldn't count as an ideology. For me, an ideology is a belief about how the world works. Because when we're doing like social science on trying to determine people's ideologies, you can't be like, oh, well, ideologies are just things you believe that are like false, because that's outside the purview of my study. Like I can't tell you it's false or not, but I'll tell you it's what you think about how the world works. And that makes it an ideology to me. So like, I'm okay with using the word ideology relatively freely in that sense. But when you're so selective about it that like those are ideologies because I don't like you and you believe it, and these are not ideologies because I'm good and smart and I believe it, like that is ridiculous.
Right. And okay, last little bit from this gem of an article. Putting on a tight tank top doesn't, of course, lead to what the bureaucrats call rape. But taking off that tank top does increase the risk of sexual intercourse that will be later regretted, especially when the tank topper has been intently mainlining rum and cokes all evening.
Jesus. The what? This is so silly. I'm so sorry. I'm just thinking about like all the guys who run down my street in like no shirt and tiny shorts, and it's like, would you say that about them? Like, are they asking for it?
I mean, this is just the most basic thing that we probably got over in the 70s or 80s or something, right? That what women wear or whether they're drinking.
And she like tried to nod to that, right? Where she's like, the tight tank top doesn't make it okay.
She's shouting it out, I feel like.
No, I mean, like she's trying to not be the person who's like, she was asking for it with that outfit, right? Because she's like, oh, well, the tight tank top doesn't make it a problem. But like taking it off and now you're in your bra, like, oh, well, now you're asking for it. It's like, why did that 3 inches of fabric change the whole equation for you?
Yeah, I don't, like, I just feel like a lot of these people, they don't understand consent. What I don't understand the most is how this can be used by someone as so rational seeming to everybody else and have gotten away with it. Like, these are the only 2 sources that he cites as junk rape statistics.
It is extremely selective. It's cherry picking, and it's...
Firstly, these are not proper sources because these are just people sharing their opinions.
Right.
And secondly, these are extremely biased sources.
Yeah, well, and he's just citing his friends because he likes, it is this like ideas laundering thing where, they all cite each other and it helps them look more reasonable and more official because they have all cited each other. Right. And if you can be a Heather McDonald or whatever and work at a right-wing think tank and be an out-and-out violent racist, but you can get somebody who works at Harvard to cite you, like that is a huge win, not just for these beliefs, which are misogynistic and horrible, but also then when people read your other truly equally heinous beliefs
on race
about other things, then it expands the zone of reasonableness over you.
Yeah, but I just don't know how it doesn't work the other way, and
that it doesn't tar them, right?
Yes. Like,
no, that's right.
It's just mind-boggling because essentially we have Christina Hoff Sommers who's minimizing rape because if someone penetrates you with their finger, then really should they be? I mean, this is something I might expect from like a mullah. Asking for 3 witnesses or some bullshit like that in Sharia law,
Right. Or like an evangelical leader.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we have Heather McDonald being like, if she's drinking, then she's also responsible for being raped.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was half naked after all.
Yeah. And look, if she wasn't dragged off like roadkill, then it wasn't so bad, right?
Wow. I mean, that is really heinous.
It's despicable. It's despicable. And these are sources in his book.
Yeah. No, that's right. The citations are absolutely a mess. They are ideologues in the most strict sense of the word.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The information is often incorrect. It is often incomplete. He just throws out disconfirming examples, loves to do that, right? Like these are some of the tendencies of academics that should be disqualifying.
Yes.
And that if he ever caught one of us doing it, he would use to destroy us.
Yeah, and I mean, this is rape apologetics. This is not junk rape statistics.
Yeah, but being against rape apologetics is woke, so... Sorry, I don't make the rules, I just enforce them. So that's not rational. You're not being rational.
So are we seeing a pattern with how many sex pests he's defended and hung out with? And
it's sex pests, it's people who justify sex pestery, it's all of it. He's just totally comfortable with that. And he's not at all afraid to be quote unquote canceled over it either, which is interesting, right? Like, if cancel culture was so scary, why would he continue to say supremely cancelable things?
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't seem to quite cancel him. No,
never in his life. But he'll go to the press and talk about how they tried. I'm so scared for the younger academics, the ones with less power than me, because if they'll treat me like this, they'll just destroy the rest of you, and I'm so concerned for you.
Right. And so this is what he said in Jerry Coyne's blog when he was responding to, people posting his Epstein photos and stuff. Since some of the social media snark insinuates that I downplay sexual exploitation,
which he does,
it may be worth adding that I have a paper trail of abhorrence of violence against women, have celebrated efforts to stamp it out, and have tried to make my own small contribution to this effort.
Oh my God. It's that joke about the goat fucker, right? Like, I did all these wonderful things. Like the guy is like, I built a wall around my town to keep us safe from invaders, but do they call me John the Wall Builder? No. Like, I built a well, but do they call me John the Well Builder? No. But you fuck one goat. It's like, but you aid and abet one child sex predator.
And, defend like 25 others and cite a few other rape apologists, and then
every couple of years for all perpetuity.
Right.
But do they focus on my good deeds? No.
Unreal. Yeah, so what a great and reasonable and rational guy Pinker is. I mean, that's
what I really love about him, right? And then, yeah, he's a defender of academic freedom, as we know. He cares very much, right? Because it's a violation of academic freedom that any sex predators ever be removed from academia. And so that's really important to him. It's also a violation of academic freedom that anybody tell him that he's wrong. It was definitely a violation of academic freedom when some linguists wrote a letter asking that he not be considered a reasonable media contact for questions of linguistics, right? When journalists want to write about a language thing, like, please do not email Steven Pinker. He will not tell you the right thing. That was a violation of academic freedom. And that actually triggered the most violent comments and threats, and caused a lot of linguists to go into hiding for a while because people were so angry at us for having signed that letter. Which that's not a violation of our academic freedom, by the way.
Of course.
And it's certainly not anything that he has ever taken even 1 second to acknowledge that it even happened.
Yeah, it's actually a violation of his academic freedom when you don't acknowledge how rational and reasonable he is.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he is affiliated with all of these groups like the Heterodox Academy and FIRE.
What's that other racist one? FAIR. Yes, I love that one.
Yeah, FAIR for All, which is the... they use MLK's image constantly to
so cringe. It's what is it? Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism.
And yeah,
everyone,
and it's so racist.
It's unfucking believably. It's all just racists.
Yeah. And what happens also, this is again, kind of behind the scenes. So I was forwarded this email so that I could verify that it was real. Basically, there was a linguist who wrote a report about, we know that there are people who, we consider their work to be outdated, and also they are engaged in, regressive projects that can harm all of us. And so if we can avoid citing them in our work, that takes, a little arrow out of their quiver. And here's some options for, if you're looking to cite other people that are not assholes, here's what you can do, right? That's what she wrote. That's obviously the IDW would hate that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But if you really look at it, it's not that unreasonable to say, I don't want to cite somebody who's going to use that citation to bolster his project of hurting me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So she wrote that. Then she got an email from a Heterodox Academy member who I will not name. And it says, "Dear person, I take the liberty to include in the exchange several colleagues I have discussed these matters with, including some colleagues from Heterodox Academy, which I am also a member of. And it is a list of some of the most highly positioned academics in linguistics who are also affiliated with the Heterodox Academy and committees at the Linguistic Society of America." And the email in it strongly condemns her report and explains how offensive it is to suggest that, for example, Steven Pinker not get cited anymore on matters of linguistics. And none of the people that were copied in on that list, which include Steven Pinker and which include Jonathan Haidt, none of those people reached out to be like, wow, that was a clear-cut case of academic bullying. I don't endorse that. Right? Mm-hmm. They all just have been brought in on this conversation over email about how bad this person is.
Now that's not cancel culture.
No, that is not cancel culture, because it happened quietly in an email among people who have the power to deny you a job.
And, it happened to one of the wokes, I presume?
Yes, it happened to one of the wokes. And they sent me that email so that I could kind of understand what happens if you write something a little bit too woke. It's that your name gets circulated around these kind of back halls.
Wow. I mean, it hurts the head to think about how much of this exists in this group of people who screech about this stuff the loudest.
That's right. Yeah, they're participating in this behind the scenes silencing, and also in kind of these sort of mob attacks, like the one that happened to the Linguist after Steven Pinker letter.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, and they can stay a little bit above the fray, right? Because, Michael Powell will write an article about it. Connor Friedersdorf will write an article about it. Claire Lehman will write an article about it. And all they're doing is reposting those articles and being like, an interesting read.
Yes,
right?
yes.
But those articles are about how we're Stalinist, Marxist, Orwellian, hordes of demons, which is what John McWhorter called us.
Are you serious?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, nice.
The demons at the gates, he called us. Erudite demons at the gates. At least he called us erudite.
Amazing.
That was nice. Anyway, but, they're in there calling us the nastiest things. And Jerry Coyne, of course, wrote multiple blog posts about how awful we were. And then the comments in there are like, I'm so happy to have their names for when the pendulum swings the other way. Like, I know what I'll be doing tomorrow. I'll be calling everybody's dean, like all this stuff. And they don't have anything to say about that as like a chilling effect on free speech. No, that's not important to them.
Of course not. And can you imagine if like some leftist wrote about the anti-woke as like a horde of demons?
Right. Yeah. And also, you're an academic who had an opinion about how, somebody shouldn't be cited. And now you've got people like emailing you your own address to you.
Jeez.
Like, how do you feel about your chances at speaking up in the future?
Yeah. I mean, it fucking sucks. I mean, it sucks on the academic level and on a smaller, less important level. Even on the podcasting level, you can see that if you are a right-wing douchebag, you have access to massive, massive platforms. Because as you said, just like how they all cite each other, they all uplift each other. So
that's right.
They get like massive amounts of retweets from very huge platforms, and then they get sanitized like on HBO by Bill Maher citing like some lunatic like Yasmin Mohammed who says that not all Nazis are extremists, or not all KKK directly lynched people, or some bullshit. So
right.
And then when you're a centrist, you get access to all those same people because it's really the same team.
Because it's not your fault if they're supporting you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not my fault that like even the right wing can see that I'm correct.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
And you always have this fallback of like, it's not that I'm an abhorrent person with incorrect views. It's that I'm fighting for the right of people to voice their opinions without getting attacked.
Yes.
And that's so noble of me, actually. And it's been a dodge that's been working since the 70s, right? Where you have like the lobbyist groups using free speech as a reason why the oil companies and the cigarette lobby should get to continue to spread misinformation and should even get to silence research that suggests that they're causing harm, because it would squash their free speech right to advertise. Right. These are cases that were tried in America. Right. And like the exact same argument is being used here, whereas like you can't just tell me that I'm transphobic or racist or whatever, because it's my free speech right to talk like this.
Right. And if you do, you're a demon, and political correctness has gone too far.
And now we're not talking about whether what I said was true or not.
Yes.
We're not talking about what the negative effects of convincing people of this thing could be. Now we're talking about whether you're a bad guy for telling me not to say it anymore.
Right, right.
It's an easy dodge.
Why do you hate freedom? It's so funny. In that Inside Higher Ed article that I mentioned earlier, there's a part where it says, Pinker said via email that he's a political liberal, a polite Canadian, and a member of the academic mainstream. Even so, since I was a graduate student, I've been in the thick of intellectual controversies and have always had critics. So, like, it's so funny to me that you have to say to someone that you're a polite Canadian, or that
Right.
you're a moderate or that you're a centrist.
I'm a really nice guy, actually.
Yeah.
He's a nice guy who called the Tuskegee experiments a one-time failure to prevent harm to a few dozen people. It was a 40-year-long
What?
experiment on 400 people. Like, what are you talking about? So nice.
What context did he say that in?
It was in Better Angels, I think, where, yeah, he was talking about like blips, in our ethical progress.
Oh, this is one of those oopsie. Can you explain for the audience what the Tuskegee experiment was?
So this was an experiment that was done on Black Americans where they were tricked into believing that they were being treated for syphilis, but in fact they were not, and they were just being observed to see what the ravages of syphilis would look like.
It's just so horrifying. And I mean, are we sensing that Pinker might be a little right-wing?
Are we? I would never be a person who would go so far as to say that. But what I will say is that he wants us to remember that there are reasonable people in the alt-right.
Oh, yes, yes.
A lot of people who are ignorant of the alt-right equate them with the skinheads and the Nazis carrying the tiki torches,
right?
Which that's who they were.
Right.
That's who was there. This is exactly what Trump did, by the way. Right? Is he was like, well, I was talking about the good ones, not the mean ones.
Yeah.
And it's like, but it was the same group.
Right. So he did this, video with Learn Liberty, or he was doing some talk. Mm-hmm. And it was called Political Correctness Might Be Red Pilling America. And the old image on it was just like, a guy holding a red and blue pill. I think that's been changed now. Yeah. Now, Learn Liberty is like a literal Koch-funded project. So, yeah. And then, he talked about how, there are like these truths that people are afraid to say.
Right. And it's like, but you don't seem very afraid.
I know.
And in fact, we're having to hear these alleged truths every single day, and nothing ever changes, and no amount of rebuttal ever changes your argument. Like, what do you mean?
Right. And the same bullshit truths. He also called the alt-right in that video the often highly literate, highly intelligent people who gravitate towards the alt-right when they hear the truth statement for the first time that's never been voiced, like in college campuses or, on respectable mainstream media, just like, capitalist societies are better than communist societies, or men and women are not identical.
Right. Yeah, no one's ever told anybody that.
Or that different ethnic groups commit violent crimes at different rates. Just look at the homicide rates for the African American community. They're like 7 or 8 times higher than European Americans. Oy.
Yeah. I mean, you would have to accept an image of the world that does not exist, where conservative ideas are never voiced, and nobody has ever thought of them before until Richard Spencer does. And then now, because he said a true thing for the first time ever, you're just like sucked in. Yeah,
you're like, oh, I don't know how to contextualize this, so he must be right, and I must become a white supremacist, because I just have not been informed enough in the past, because the woke leftists have done an injustice to society by shielding me from all these difficult truths. I mean,
this is something that these guys do a lot, where they take a person, like an example of a person from the right that they're like, obviously this guy is wrong, but he arrived at his position through facts and rationality. Mm-hmm. And, they're reacting to a real thing. And it's like, if you really look at how they are getting there, that is not the case. And it gives them so much more credit. And it also hamstrings us when we're trying to undo that. If we're forced to be like, well, if obviously you're right on the facts, but please come over here anyway. How is that supposed to be effective? And this happens when they talk about the right-wing assault on American or, public education as a concept, right? Where they're like, well, Republicans lost faith in America after they saw it get taken over by Marxism.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, no, they weren't reacting to a real thing there.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that argument made in terms of how the worst thing about Trump is that he's like emboldened the wokeness.
Yeah, and Jonathan Chait has said it. I've heard him with my own ears say it that way, that he was like, well, Republicans stopped trusting higher ed because they saw what happened. And it's like, well, that doesn't make any sense because what happened didn't happen.
Well, how about maybe you guys have spent your whole lives discrediting higher ed, and maybe that
but it's actually been a really long project because, in the 50s, the American right could not get the American public to disapprove of public higher ed. Mm-hmm. It was like the opinion polls were just stuck on the positive. Mm-hmm. The American people were just like, no, that's like a utility. Like, we need that. Mm-hmm. And so they were like, fine, we're going to engage in this really long-term campaign. We're going to put a lot of money behind it, and we're going to get people to believe that they're not teaching your children what you want them to learn. Mm-hmm. And eventually that tide is going to turn. And it did. And then a bunch of these centrist liberals were like, well, obviously that's because of, the woke takeover.
Yeah. And it's just... It's so full of shit. The fact that, people aren't, the fact that he says that people aren't going to hear that different ethnic groups commit violent crimes at different rates. I mean, we fucking hear it all the time.
It's a meme, for God's sake. Like, I was on Reddit in the 2000 whatevers hearing the 1350 meme. Like, everybody has heard this.
Fox News is based on it. Breitbart is based on it. And the thing that leftists dispute is the causes of that.
Right. And the remedies.
Yeah. They're the ones saying that it's not innate. That, and these guys are wanting to imply that it is.
Yeah. And they'll just Mott and Bailey it over to like, well, no, we're just saying it's cultural.
Yeah.
Right. But they still won't ever accept any kind of explanation that's situational or, any policy changes that doesn't include putting more money into the violent police.
Right. And are we really saying that capitalism is demonized in the US of A?
Oh my God. Can you imagine? Like, if we ever actually started having a culture of demonizing capitalism, these guys' brains would explode. They would just die where they sat.
He also said this one thing about, like, how men are better at mentally rotating 3D objects in their heads, but women are better at word problems in math. So, I mean, I guess he was trying to say that women can also be good at math.
Yeah,
but at the word problems.
Only if it's verbal. Only if it's like, Sally bought 3 purses for $200 each.
I'm sorry, but this all just seems so stupid to me.
Jenny took a train to the mall going 300 miles an hour.
And then he also said on Ruben's show that he thinks that James Damore, remember that Fired for Truth Google guy who did this deranged...
That was really fun to be married to a Google employee during.
Yeah, like he decided to send this memo to the whole fucking company, unsolicited, saying that women are inferior in some ways to men or something. Like, just what? Yeah. Who does that at work?
No, that's right. And I have like a very normie husband who's also very offline. Yeah. And I asked him because he works in tech and he was around, and I was like, "Did you hear about this?" And he was like, "Oh my God, that guy sucks so much."
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't take very much. For, like any average person could look at that email and just be like, well, this is a bunch of bullshit.
Not Pinker, though. But anyways, Pinker was
like... he's no average thinker, is he?
No. He holds a lot of skulls and brains.
Yeah. He sucked all of their rationality out of them, and that's why he's like this.
So he thinks that James Damore might have taken his case on gender from Pinker's book on the blank slate.
Oh.
Like, he said this himself. Like, he volunteered this. He's like, I think he might have gotten his case from my book. I think,
This is like when the British transphobic feminists were like, Matt Walsh plagiarized from us. It's like, that's not something you want to advertise.
Right. I mean, I don't think he was saying plagiarized. I think he was saying inspired. No. He was more positive about it. But he was like, thankfully none of the cancel culture has come for me for that. It's like, because James Damore did it.
You didn't write that letter. You wrote other heinous letters. Yeah,
but he still wanted a piece of it because he's like, maybe he was inspired by my book to write that.
But so that is exactly how cancel culture doesn't come for these guys, right? It's because he is courting controversy.
Yeah.
He didn't have to say anything, but he piped his little voice up and he stood his body up and raised his hand and said, me, I'm part of this.
Yeah.
So, like, in what sense are we cowed or silenced or chilled?
Yeah, but I'm just a little polite Canadian.
I'm just so polite is the thing. He very politely orchestrated a harassment mob against his own colleagues. But, okay.
Very politely helped out Jeffrey Epstein.
He very politely called us out to lunch and blocked anyone who ever thought a mean thought about him.
Yeah, he's real polite like that. But, okay, so let's give a quick summary. What are the main takeaways?
Steven Pinker is the only rational thinker in the whole world, and we should all listen to everything he says and never question him, or else we're mean and hate science.
Yeah, and ideological demons or something.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, this is a person who has a legitimate academic background, does participate in real research and runs labs that do real research. And I would never want the people who have worked in his labs to be tarred, as illegitimate researchers, because they are doing good work. They just have the misfortune or the lack of judgment of being at Harvard. Oops. I would never, but that's just me. And he has used that reputation and his propensity towards being sort of watchable and interesting to look at. Well, honestly, people keep being like, "Oh, he's such a good writer, though," and I'm like, "Where? Show me the good writing."
Yeah, it's just repetitive. Find him cringe.
Yeah, I know he has a good vocabulary because he does use it sometimes, but in his books, it's very repetitive language, and it gets really frustrating. Anyway, the point is, he's using kind of everything that's in his toolbox, including his reputation, especially his reputation and his connections, to step way outside of his field of expertise without checking his biases and without asking around and trying to disprove the people he disagrees with. And he is selling essentially a very regressive, reactionary worldview. Very
leaning to one side.
Very much. We won't say which side that is, but just leaning. He's just really a leany guy. And, he is helping to bolster the arguments of people who really, truly want to dismantle education and who want to stop the dissemination of information to the people.
And civil rights to some extent.
Yeah, it's very anti-democratic. He'll stop short and be like, but I don't approve of book banning. And it's like, yeah, but you are supplying the arguments that are being used to justify book banning. The natural conclusion of your arguments are things like book banning, things like purging undesirables from academia, things like dismantling what they call the grievance studies, cultural studies and history and feminist studies and all of that stuff.
It's so funny because these guys are just full of grievance.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a lot of grievance.
Yeah.
They're pretty upset about a lot of things.
Yeah. So Pinker doesn't think rape is a big deal.
That's right.
It's
or misogynist violence. He doesn't think inequality, like wage inequality or like wealth inequality, is important. He said explicitly that he doesn't care about that. He only cares if that like extreme poverty is going down, which it is, but very, very slowly. Right. And the fact is that there are ill effects of extreme income inequality, even if nobody is starving. Right. Income inequality or wealth inequality, really wealth inequality. You really should not ignore the way that would impact people. Right. Because having an oligarchy that controls aspects of your life, just because you're able to access gruel, right, doesn't mean that those civil rights now don't matter, that are being stripped away from you by oligarchs who have all of the power concentrated among their brethren, among their friends. And wealth inequality is correlated with a lot of things like poor health outcomes, shorter lifespan, stress, a lot of things that do matter in terms of the well-being of a population.
Stop being so negative. Look at the bigger picture. We don't have slavery anymore.
You're right.
And things
we do have more refugees than we've ever had since World War II. But I heard that Western Europe doesn't do conquests anymore. We don't fight each other anymore. So I say we as if I'm in Western Europe. As a white person, I am Western Europe.
Right, exactly.
But it's so funny to just be like, well, Western European countries don't do wars with each other anymore, and that's why violence has gone down.
Right.
Like, never mind specific claim.
Yeah, never mind all the other people.
Right, or all the things that we of the West are doing in other places.
Yes, exactly. But so let's all be hyper optimistic and as objective and rational as Steven Pinker, and polite and moderate. Extremely moderate.
As we all know, the most rational person is the person who says that they're being rational the most.
Exactly. And I will leave you with this one quote from a New York Times article about Steven Pinker's book, Rationality.
Oh, wait. I wanted to say one more thing about that book because I think it's really, really, really telling. Okay, so he wrote this book, right? It's called Rationality, Why It Matters, Why It's Scarce, something, something, something. Anyway, his working title when he was writing it and was like starting to hype it was Don't Go There, Common Knowledge and the Science of Civility, Hypocrisy, Outrage, and Taboo, which I think really is telling about like where he was coming from when he was writing it, because ultimately what does that title say to you? It says like, I'm just asking questions. Like, you should not criticize me for saying whatever I want to say. And the fact that the first thing that he considers to be like a don't go there thing is common knowledge. Like, are you truly arguing for common sense here instead of like finding out for sure? Like, that is literally ideology. That's what common knowledge is.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's Pinker.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. I love this quote. Please tell me the quote.
All right. The quote is, "Still, Pinker is troubled by what he sees as rationality's image problem. Rationality is uncool," he laments. "It isn't seen as dope, fat," with a PH, "fat, chill, fly, sick, or da bomb." Just picture.
Like, I've read this quote a lot of times, but hearing you say it is so much worse. Oh my gosh. I mean, this is truly like old man yells at cloud territory. And it is so emblematic of his whole approach, right? Is that like all of my critics are irrational, they hate progress, and they hate reason. And it's like, what if you just tried to find out?
Right. And also, as some people pointed out after that quote, was that like, it's clear that he's upset about rationality not being as white-coded, because some of these terms, even though they're outdated, like...
Right. No, he's trying... Yeah, he's like, all of these kids today with their loose pants.
Yeah.
They don't like my brand of rationality, and it's their problem.
Oh, yeah. All right, dear listeners, as we head out of this extremely rational episode, please remember to support this show on patreon.com/nice mangoes. Every time someone supports this show, their IQ increases a lot. And
that is science.
That is extremely correct science, yes. And just, picture Steven Pinker holding a brain.
I do. That's how I fall asleep every night.
Oh, all right. Well, Caitlin, it's always a pleasure talking to you. And we'll talk again soon.
Sounds good.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support it, there are several ways you can do that. You can share it online, talk about what you just heard. You can leave a 5-star review to help others find it too. And you can also subscribe via patreon.com/nice mangoes. No E in mangoes. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter before it's completely wrecked, you'll find me at Nice Mangoes. Again, no E in mangoes.